Welcome to Distribution, Connecting Comics and Readers. I'm a big fan of CXC. I've enjoyed so much of the programming here, and it's like a real honor to be a part of it. Shout out to Cara Bean, who drew this awesome comic. She's in the audience here. She's also at table 92 all weekend. She has amazing mental health comics. We've been CXC buddies for years. My name is Neil Brideau. I run Radiator Comics, which is celebrating its 10th anniversary. We distribute small press and self-published comics. Ta-da! And we also do a little bit of publishing and some community organizing. Today, I want to talk about what the heck comics distribution is, how I got into distribution, how Radiator Comics distributes comics, how you might want to distribute your own comics, how to make a small fortune distributing comics, and also how you can contribute to your comics community. And I want to do like a little quick definition. For me, distribution is the simple act of putting comics into readers' hands. So that's at events like CXC. That's handing a comic to a friend and being like, I made this, I want you to have it. It's selling your comics online. It's selling to distros and stores who will then sell them to the readers. At the end of this, we'll have time for questions. And my hope is that you'll leave with both some concrete things that you can do, like on Monday, to get your comics a wider reach, and then also some larger ideas to think about when it comes to getting comics to a wider audience. I made a zine, this little zine that some of you have now, and I'd like to read it real quick. What the heck is a comics distro? Did you know there are thousands of cartoonists making fun, thoughtful, and smart comics all on their own? They write and draw the whole dang thing, and then they also manage the printing and the binding, and then they have to try and get it into readers' hands. It's too much! That's where distros, which is short for distributor, like Radiator Comics come in. Cartoonists send us copies of their comics, and we take on some of the burden of promotion and sales so that they can get back to drawing comics. We sell to individuals, we sell to bookstores and comic shops, and we sell to libraries and educators all across the country. So what happens when somebody orders comics from Radiator Comics? I jump on my bicycle. I have this beautiful blue Pannier named Linus, and I ride through the hot streets of Miami past mango trees and peacocks, which is actually true, and overtrain tracks, and a small stinky canal, which is also unfortunately true, through the king tides to our storage unit, which is packed full of great small press and self-published comics. Here I am saying, what a great order! Orders are packed and dropped off at the post office within 48 hours of being placed, and every 3 months, I pay clients out 65% of the cover price for the comics that we've sold. And we often host cartoonists at our table when we exhibit at festivals. At CXC, we're at table 50, and we're hosting Drew Lerman and Brendan Hankins, who's here in the audience. I hope you'll stop by and say hello and check out their amazing comics. So, I want to go back in time and explain how I got here and what drives my work. This is me with my good friend David William at the first comics festival that I ever tabled at, the 2008 Stumptown Comics Festival in Portland, Oregon. I've always wanted to be a cartoonist, but I really started being serious about making comics in 2005, and then a few years later I saw people blogging about Stumptown, so I decided to sign up for a table, and I went, and it was a lot of fun, and I've been tabling at festivals like Stumptown, RIP, and CXC, Please Live Forever. I'm going to come back to this photo near the end, so just like file it away in your brain pocket. I was inspired to start making my own comics when I moved to Chicago, Illinois from Albany, New York in 2003 and started shopping at Quimby's bookstore. And when you're thinking about selling your comics to stores, Quimby's should be at the top of your list because Quimby's has an open consignment policy, which means that anybody who's self-publishing books, comics, or zines can send in or walk in with 3 to 5 copies of their comics, and they'll put them on the shelf, and they'll sell it for you. And once it sells, they pay you 60% of the retail price upon request. And this allows Quimby's to take a chance on titles that they otherwise wouldn't be able to buy up front. And because of this, they have the largest collection of comics and zines of any store that I am personally aware of. I could be wrong about that statistic, but from my own experience. So I got hooked on these mini comics because it was obvious that anybody could make them. All you needed was paper and a pencil and a photocopier and some staples. And then this store would sell it for you. And up until this point, I always thought that getting comics into the world required a publisher, like some sort of platform, whether it was like a school newspaper or a professional newspaper, Alternative News Weekly, or a book publisher or a comic publisher, to be like, yes, we will print this and sell it for you. And this was like this method was like me saying yes, and that was very liberating. So I started making my own comics, and here are some of my early mini comics. And as I got more into self-publishing, I finally felt like I had a path to becoming a professional, famous cartoonist. And in 2008, like I said, with the Stumptown Comics Festival, I started tabling at small press comics festivals. I also started volunteering at a lot of them as well, including the first 2 times I went to SPX, I volunteered. And in 2009, I actually got to start working at Quimby's bookstore. And this is a view from behind the counter. These are the consignment binders, and every slip of paper in there, or most of the slips of paper in there, represent just one consigner. So you can see how many people are consigning through Quimby's. And I actually did the math a couple times when I worked at Quimby's. We averaged 14 new titles a day, which means that like Quimby's really is just this like churning sea of books and comics and zines. Every day we were getting comics that we had never heard of. Every day we were selling out of zines that we would never see again. And that was really amazing. And actually really the most rewarding aspect of working at Quimby's was this consignment system, because people would come in with these comics that they made, and they'd be like, hey, can you sell this for me? And we, like, without any hesitation, I could say, yes, we'll sell it for you. And that was a really great feeling. And then on the flip side, when people would come back to like check on their sales, even if they only sold like 1 or 2 copies, they'd be like, wait a minute, so somebody came into the store, some stranger came into the store, and they saw my comic, and they thought that this was worth buying, like spending money on? That's amazing. So a really special connection there. And about a little over a year after starting to work at Quimby's, 3 friends of mine and I started the Chicago Zine Fest, which is a weekend of celebrating self-published publications. If you're in Chicago on October 5th, or near Chicago on October 5th, go to the Chicago Zine Fest. It's going to be amazing. And I had so much fun organizing the Zine Fest that 4 other friends of mine and I, a couple years later, started Cake, the Chicago Alternative Comics Expo. This is a poster from 2019 by Marnie Galloway, who was also a Cake organizer for a time. She was supposed to be here. Unfortunately, she had to cancel. So I'm very sad about that. So all this time, as I'm organizing Cake and the Zine Fest, and I'm working at Quimby's and working with consigners, I still have the personal goal of like making comics, get noticed, get published, build a career, become a famous, revered cartoonist like Linda Berry or Chris Ware or Jaime Hernandez. But during this time, things are shifting. My perspective's kind of shifting. I'm, working with the consigners. I'm like building the Zine Fest and Cake as these platforms for other artists and seeing the impact that that has on my community. And I've also been exhibiting and volunteering at a ton of comics festivals and meeting really skilled zinesters and cartoonists whose work are just like blowing my mind. And I'm also meeting a ton of really amazing publishers, distributors, educators, librarians, journalists, and other comics festival organizers. Chris Pitzer is in the audience, and the work that he did with Ad House Books is super inspirational. And who I want to be, who I want to emulate, shifts from these amazing cartoonists to these amazing supporters, including Chris. If you are unfamiliar with any of these folks, I'd like to introduce them to you. On the top left-hand corner is the late, great Tom Spurgeon, who was an editor for the Comics Journal. He ran the Comics Reporter. He was the executive director of CXC. We all owe him a debt for being in this room. Annie Koyama, who just last night was honored with the Tom Spurgeon Award, is the most generous supporter of comics that I know of. She runs Koyama Provides, which gives mini grants to artists, and before that she ran Koyama Press, which put out some of the best comics in the 20-teens. On the bottom left-hand corner are Liz Mason and Eric Kersimer. Liz Mason is the manager at Quimby's. Kersimer is the owner. He also owns Chicago Comics. They're huge champions of free speech and weird literature in Chicago. And then last but definitely not least, Dylan Williams, who was a cartoonist, who put his own comics on the back burner to run Sparkplug Comics, which was a small press publisher and distro whose mission was to be so good at publishing comics, the larger publishers would actually like steal his artists away from him and give them better publishing deals. So I wanted to do my part. I wanted to be like these folks. In conversations with cartoonists, I kept hearing and discussing that one of the biggest hurdles all cartoonists face is getting their comics out into the world. Most people didn't get into comics because they're really into packing and shipping, right? Like cartoonists want to draw comics. And I felt like the skills that I had learned from Liz at Quimby's and this passion that had developed in working with the Zine Fest and Cake made me a good candidate to start a distro. So in 2014, I started Radiator Comics, representing 25 cartoonists. My goal was to expand the number of people reading comics that I was really falling in love with, radiating out that goodness that is self-published comics. So yeah, I started Radiator. I look for artists all over the place at events like CXC, on social media, from recommendations from other cartoonists, and through a submission form on our website. We've also partnered with the Massachusetts Independent Comics Expo for the past 5 years to offer distribution to all the titles that receive a MICE mini grant, which is the micro grant that the festival gives out to exhibitors. And when I'm considering the types of comics that I want to stock in Radiator's catalog, I'm looking for qualities that aren't necessarily like quantifiable. A lot of it is like, can I be excited enough about this comic or this cartoonist's work to put my labor into promoting it? And so I'm really interested in sincere comics, ones that focus on storytelling and character development. Because I come from a zine background, I love comics that show either the figurative or the literal fingerprints of the cartoonist on the publication. When I do take on an artist, they send me about 20 copies of their title. I read the comic, I scan the cover and usually three of the inside pages, and I take photos of it, I weigh it and measure it, and I write up a description of the comic and I put it up on the website, and then I promote it through social media and email newsletters. These are some behind the scenes looks at like my WordPress site of a comic that I recently added, KCN number 1 by Evelyn Perez, who's an amazing cartoonist. She's at table 84, and she has the second and final issue of KCN number 2 debuting at CXC, so definitely check out table 84 for Evelyn's comics. So I covered this a little bit, but like what happens when I get an order? Before I started Radiator, when I was selling my own comics through Etsy, I would put up a handful of copies of my comics up on the site, and like months later, I'd receive an order for a comic. And instead of being like really excited about it, I was filled with dread. Oh no! Like I posted those 6 comics like 4 months ago. Do I still have those copies? Do I have an envelope to put them in? Like how much would it cost to ship this? When do I have time to go to the post office? Should I include a note? Like what would the note say? So when I started Radiator Comics, because other people were relying on me to sell their comics, I knew that I had to put like systems in place, and for me that was a huge help. I bought envelopes and boxes that the comics I was carrying would fit in, and I also bought chipboard to keep envelopes sturdy when they're being mailed. Here's a little process photo of an actual order that I packed up earlier this week. And I also bought a tape gun, which still, after 10 years, is very exciting to use. I started saving all of the packing material and like boxes that I received that like I felt were in good enough shape to use again for mailing. I created a template in Google Sheets for a packing slip so I could easily copy and paste the information from an order into the spreadsheet and then print it out. And I use a service called Pirate Ship to print out my postage, so I don't have to wait in line at the post office to buy postage. There are a couple other services like Print Ninja and ShipStation, but Pirate Ship is free, and they give you a discount on postage. I set a goal of mailing out orders 1 to 2 business days after receiving them, and these are all my systems, and you can have your own, but I really do think that systems are extremely helpful because the less you have to think about when orders come in, the better, and you can be like this little guy packing up orders. I regularly schedule payouts to clients every quarter for their comics. that I have sold, I pay 65% of what was paid to me. So when I sell a $10 comic, I pay the cartoonist $6.50. If I sell that same comic to a bookstore or a comic shop, they pay me $6 so that they can sell the comic at full price to a customer, and then I pay the cartoonist $3.90 because that's 65% of the $6 that the store gave me. So what's the benefit for everyone? I represent over 200 cartoonists distributing almost 600 titles in our distro. I'm getting so close. And so when individual stores and libraries order from Radiator Comics, they can order a bunch of different titles from a bunch of different cartoonists all at once. This encourages individuals to check out cartoonists that they might not be aware of. Like they came to a site for one cartoonist and they're like, oh, what's this other comic? And it also allows stores to simplify their ordering of small press and self-published titles. And we want to make it as easy as possible for stores to stock small press titles. And it also lifts the burden of distribution off of self-publishers a little bit. So, of course, there are also limitations. I'm supported by many people who want to see Radiator Comics succeed, but Radiator Comics is one person. It's me. So if I'm prepping a title for the website, there are a ton of things that I am not doing, like scheduling social media posts or drafting email newsletters or packing up orders or responding to emails and a whole ton of other things. I apologize if I have not responded to your email. And my reach is relatively small. Like over 10 years, I've accumulated about 120 wholesale customers, which are libraries and stores. But that does not mean that they are ordering on a monthly or a quarterly or even a yearly basis. Also, I mentioned that people send me like 20 copies of their comics. 20 copies is not a lot, and it's not going to pay any client's rent. And I would really love it if Radiator Comics was a venue through which cartoonists could view it as like a reliable source of income for their living, but in reality, I'm one of what should be many support systems for cartoonists. But enough about me. Let's talk about your comics. For those of you who are here in this room because you make comics and you want more people to read your comics, the first thing that I want to say to you is that your comics are worth it. You put so much hard work into writing and drawing and printing your comics. I want to make eye contact with some people. Your comics are worth it. 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 I guarantee you, there are people out there whose days will be better because they read your comic. Your comics are absolutely worth it. So you have a couple options. You can seek to get your comics picked up by a distro like Radiator Comics or these other folks, Spit and a Half, Aquatic Panda, Birdcage Bottom Books, Domino Books, Emerald Comics Distro, Rooster Cow, Triangular Comics. There are a ton of folks. And it's best to do your research before contacting distros. My peers are all 1 or 2 person operations, and what we focus our limited resources on are very reflective of our own personal tastes. So reach out to the distros where your comics make sense. Most of these distros will have submission policies on their websites. They'll tell you if they're accepting submissions and how to contact them. And you can also contact shops on your own. And even if you're working with one or several distros, it's good to reach out to shops on your own. And just like with contacting distros, it's very good to first do your research. A lot of distros and small presses have lists of shops to which they sell on their websites, including Radiator Comics. We have a list of all the shops that we sell to. That's a great place to start because you know that those stores carry small press titles. Steal those lists. Local shops are also a great place to start just because they might not be interested in small press comics necessarily, but they are often interested in local comics, and you are a local cartoonist. And just like distros, a lot of stores have information on their websites on how to submit books, so doing your research is really important. You might also want to think outside the box, like are there stores that are not bookstores or comic shops where your comics make sense? Like a bike repair shop for your bike-related comic, or a pet store for your Cats Do the Darndest Things comic, or a pinball arcade for your pinball zine. Book buyers are very busy, so being polite and direct about your comic is appreciated. Being clear about what the comic is about, how much it costs, both the retail price and the wholesale price, and why it fits in their store is helpful. Don't call or visit during busy times like weekends or holidays. Book Book buyers have a really good sense of what will and will not sell in their specific store. So if a shop rejects you, be courteous and respect their decision. If you think your work really does fit into that store, there's nothing wrong with approaching them the next time that you have a new title. But definitely don't take it personally if a store or a distro or a publisher or a festival or a person stopping by your table is not interested in interacting with your comics. It's not about you. If a shop does order comics from you, it's always good to include a, sorry, it's not always good. You should always include a packing slip or invoice or some sort of paperwork with your comics that clearly states how many copies you're sending, the quantity, the title, the retail price, which is what you want them to sell it for, the wholesale price, which is what you want them to pay you for each copy, the total that's owed, and how they should pay you. It's also a good idea to follow up with shops, and it's totally reasonable to ask them when you should check in and by what method of communication they prefer. This is especially true for if you're selling stuff on consignment. Lastly, take your time. Be patient. Be kind to yourself. Reaching out to stores can be really scary. You're putting yourself out there. It's a vulnerable act. You would much rather be making comics. So be nice to yourself. And it's also good to like imagine your comics in the store and consider the design of your comics. At a comics fest, you can point to your comic and explain what's so great about it. But you're not going to be in every store, and you can't expect the store staff to recommend the comic to people or like hand sell it. So it's important to kind of consider the design of your comic as the means of selling your comic. It's selling itself. So here are some design things to kind of think about. First, like make sure that the title and your name are printed legibly on the cover of the comic. That's helpful for both the customer to know what they're getting and also for the staff at the store to know what the heck they're selling. If it has a spine, also include that information there because a lot of shops stack their books spine out. Your comic is more likely to sell if it fits on a shelf well. So if your primary goal is to sell to comic book shops, consider the dimensions of most comics there. If your primary goal is to sell to bookstores, consider the size of books there. If your comic is like a wacky size, like 4.5 inches wide and like 24 inches tall, it's going to be really difficult to shelf and thoroughly hated by store staff. It may stand out, or it may be shoved sideways in the back of the store and nobody's going to see it. Design aspects like belly bands, die-cut covers, and bonus stickers or prints are really wonderful, but they can complicate the book's life at a bookstore. When selling to stores, I'd recommend not including anything that could easily be damaged or come loose or impede a customer's ability to flip through a book, including putting your comic in a plastic sleeve. And I do not want anybody to walk away and be like, Neil doesn't like wacky designs and inventive designs. I am a sucker for them. But if your comic is designed in a way that's going to make it harder to sell in a store, you might want to print up a simpler version specifically for stores if you can swing that. One final note about getting your own comics to more readers. Everything's always more fun with friends. If you have buddies who are making comics, especially if those comics complement each other, I'd encourage you to work together on getting your comics out there. It'll be less work for everybody, and you'll have fun. Friends are good. So we're going to get to the good part. I'm just kidding. Whenever I come to presentations like this, it often feels like the person who's speaking up here has all the answers and has figured it all out. And I could totally end my talk right here and be like, if you follow these tips, you'll be on like the easy street to piles of zine money. But that's not real. This is not real. If you're in touch with the discourse around comics, you've probably heard that not a lot of people are making a living making comics. Ashanti Fortson, along with contributors Shannon Wright, Sunmi, and Lily J. Harris, wrote a really fantastic article about burnout in Black Jose Press's Gladiolus magazine called The Broken Heart at the Center of Comics. They're turning it into a zine now, which will be available through Radiator Comics soon. Nate Powell famously made a social media post 5 years ago with some back of the napkin math about how thin you have to stretch your advance on a graphic novel for it to last the entire time that you're making your book. Recent hashtags like comics paid me and comics broke me paint pictures of how overworked and underpaid cartoonists are. The bottom line is there's no money in comics. And I'd like to be a little vulnerable with everybody here and share a chart with you that I have been keeping for 10 years. It's a spreadsheet where I track every penny that comes into Radiator Comics and every penny that goes out of Radiator Comics. And here it is. Oh, no, this is actually, oh no, this is it. This is it. Yeah. It looks a lot more intimidating on this screen than that screen. But, so this is the story. Radiator Comics spends an average of $200 to $300 a month more than we take in sales. There are months and there are years when I have turned a small profit, but not enough to live on, and it all just like goes right back into Radiator. My spouse has a job that supports our family financially, and that is honestly the only way that I'm able to devote the amount of time that I can to Radiator Comics. So, why do a job that doesn't provide me a steady paycheck? Because this is a very real sentiment. It really does fill me with so much joy that I can be a conduit for cartoonists to get their heartfelt work out into the world, and a platform through which readers can find comics that really connect with them. This chart may paint a bleak picture of running a comics business, but you can find numbers that will tell any story that you want. So in 10 years, I've been able to champion almost 1,000 titles through the distro. I've shipped out over 3,000 mail orders to individuals and nearly 400 wholesale orders to shops and libraries. I've published 7 books and comic series, plus a bunch of like little free side comics. I've hosted dozens of cartoonists at tables at festivals like CXC. I've run 3 pop-up shops, and I also ran a year's worth of online programming during the pandemic. And I have paid out over $105,000 to cartoonists whose comics I distribute and publish. And that feels really good to say out loud. There's no money in comics, but that doesn't mean that there won't always be no money in comics, and maybe like 1 or 2 distributors or micropresses or cartoonists will be able to like game the system and like eke out a living. But more realistically, if making, publishing, or distributing comics is to become a sustainable business, it won't be because one person figured it out. It'll be because a whole bunch of people took on support roles and came up with innovative solutions and systems to get more people reading the comics that our community produces. So I want to end this with a pitch to you that you can be a part of this solution. Consider how you can support your comics community. It doesn't have to be something big and official, and it doesn't have to be a distro, though we definitely need more of those. And you might not know what it is that you might want to do, but there may in fact be something that you're already doing that can foster and grow into like a support system for your comics community. And I want to bring you back to this photo that I started with. This is me from the 2008 Stumptown Comics Festival with my good friend and oftentimes collaborator, David William. At that time, I had self-published 2 mini-comics, and I didn't feel like I had enough to justify filling a half table. So I asked some of my webcomic friends if I could sell their comics as well. And I did not know what I was doing. I was just like trying to fill the table. But thinking back to it, like the first time that I tabled for myself, I was also sort of acting as a distributor, which is not to suggest that I have some sort of like grand destiny to be a distributor, but rather that what you can contribute may be hiding in plain sight. So if you do feel so inspired, please know that the folks who are currently in those support roles, publishers, distributors, event organizers, journalists, reviewers, librarians, folks running microgrants, we are eager to welcome you onto Team Comics. I found when I was starting Radiator Comics that the people who would consider me their competition, John Porcelino and JT Yost, were the people who were the most generous with their time and insights into running a distro. So I encourage you to reach out to the people in those existing roles. If I am one of those folks, this is my email, neil@radiatorcomics.com. I'm at the festival all weekend. It's also totally valid if you were like, hey man, I just came in here to get some tips on how to sell my comics to like stores and folks like that. I did make a quick and sloppy guide to distribution, which includes a lot of like the nuts and bolts things that I went into in this talk. Thanks so much for listening. be happy to take any questions or if we want to have a conversation or whatever. Also, if you're an exhibitor and you need to get to your table, I will not be offended at all if you walk out. I should have said that at the beginning of the thing.
I'll reiterate that.
Oh yeah, I will repeat the questions when you, yeah.
Want me to speak lower?
No. Unless, do you want to come up and
I was gonna say, I'll
just talk into the
reiterate
mic?
that
Or?
packaging is very important.
Yes.
I ran a small distro for just a little while, and one of the most infuriating things is somebody whose comics I love threw them in a box with no protection. Because the end user, the customer, wants, I would assume, the best sample of a comic they can get. And I was just going to say, I missed it yesterday, but Iona Fox did a panel on packaging, so that should be online later this year.
Yeah, Iona Fox's, thank you
Yeah.
for saying that. Should I repeat?
It'll be on YouTube.
Okay.
It'll be on the CXC YouTube channel.
Yeah, Iona's presentation was fantastic about packing up original art. So when I worked at Quimby's, I learned a lot about packaging. One of the things that we always employed, and I still employ, is the shake test. If you're sending more than, if you're sending something in an envelope, I do this like ravioli kind of thing where I can go back to that slide. I like wrap up all of my comics. Usually if they're like different sizes, I might pack them up into like 2 different packages of like-sized things. And then I take these, does this have a pointer? That there is 2 pieces of chipboard, which is like really thin cardboard. I put them together and then I tape them like a ravioli so that the comics are like the cheese in the ravioli. For larger orders, at Quimby's and Radiator Comics, I employ the shake test where I pack up an order, and if I shake it and I hear anything, then I have to repack. I have to like put more packing into it. You don't want to hear anything move around. Also, especially if you're shipping stuff media mail, you don't want to make any noises because the if like a postal worker picks it up and shakes it and they're like, what's in here? This doesn't sound like a book. Like they're more likely to open it and be like, there's some weird thing about media mail that I think it's technically still in the rules that comics don't count because you can't have any advertisements in the thing that you're mailing in media mail, which is often cheaper than any other form of mailing. Of course, the comics that you're gonna find at CXC, they don't have advertisements in them. And it actually specifically states if you are like in like the notes like advertising other titles of your own, like in the back of your comic, that doesn't count as advertising. Like that's okay to ship. But like sometimes postal workers will be like, no, comics are not, you can't send any comics. So the less likely, what's that?
Just don't tell.
Right, no, yeah. If anybody asks what you're shipping, it's books.
Yeah.
You're shipping books. Yeah. Yes, thank you.
That's what I always did.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you started work at Quimby's. Do you have any tips for gaining relevant experience to start distributing? Or do you say, just fucking start?
I mean, definitely working at Quimby's was super helpful because I got to see, at least from like the book seller's point of view, both kind of like what stores want, but then also how like the larger distributors operate. So I don't know if I can speak necessarily to other. I think like working customer service jobs is always good to like sort of like think about to think about sort of those taking on that role because like running a distro is a customer service thing. You're like dealing with customers, and I often when I have like stacks of orders to deal with, like it's very easy for me to be like, well, I can do them like fast or something like that. And I'm like, wait, I might have 10 orders, but each of those customers is only getting 1 of those orders. So like keeping in mind like a customer service mentality is super helpful. I guess any job also where like there's like logistics or like systems in place that you have to like follow, like just sort of like conditioning yourself to like sort of, be somebody that you can be reliable and then also somebody who can like get stuff done is helpful. I don't know, does that answer the question at all?
No, it
or-
does.
Okay,
It super does.
okay.
Did you make a business plan and have a?
Yes, that's actually a great question. The question is, did I make a business plan? So when I started Radiator Comics, I signed up for this program called SCORE. The Small Business Administration offers a program called SCORE. It's an acronym that I can never remember, but the last 2 letters are retired executives. So it's retired executives who volunteer their time to mentor people who are starting businesses. It's totally free. Most cities have a Small Business Administration office. So every week I went to the Small Business Administration office in downtown Chicago and met with a retired executive, Gay Johnson, and she would, she'd help me like work through like writing up a business plan and stuff like that. That was super helpful, both for her knowledge, but then also because I was accountable to somebody who like wasn't a friend that I could be like, oh, is it okay if I'm not, and like, so every single week I'd be like, oh no, I need to like get that stuff done that I told Gay I was gonna do. And so I would like scramble to get it done, and I'd really consider canceling. I'd be like, well, it's not like I'm paying for this or anything. And like, so I'd scramble, get it done, get down to the office and meet with Gay, and we'd set up a plan for the next week. And it was super helpful, and like without fail, like I'm not even like, this isn't exaggeration at all. Every single week, the secretary would come in while we were talking, and she'd be like, your 1 o'clock canceled, your 2 o'clock canceled, something like that. And so it was like this idea, like I was like, oh yeah, like those people are just like me. They also like set a goal and like, they were like, uh-oh, I'm not gonna meet it, I'm gonna cancel, and like, I didn't. And so like just having that sort of accountability was super important. I also worked with the Loyola Law School's business clinic. I don't know how many schools offer this, but it's law students who are under like supervision by professors doing like the paperwork, the lawyer paperwork for starting businesses. So I actually, Cake was filing its nonprofit stuff and Radiator was filing its LLC paperwork at the exact same time. Like I would meet with those students and do both of those things. And that was super helpful because it was free and they knew what they were doing. And so yeah, looking for resources like that is super, super helpful if you want to start a business. But also, oh, thank you. You also don't, like, it can be like a more, like what you're doing doesn't have to be an official business if you don't want it to be. If you want it to just be like small scale, like let's do a Jam Comics hangout every week, or let's, I don't know, like I love going to like shows at like punk houses. Let me see if I can set up a table and sell like my friends' zines at the punk shows or whatever. Other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'll throw in a bit to your media mail discussion.
Yeah.
Which is also apparently, in order for a thing to be a book, according to media mail, it has to have a spine. So like me, they made like Repo Comics, aka accordion stuff. They will ding you for that.
Oh, I feel like there's something in the write-up that says like a pamphlet, if it's 8 pages or more, like a pamphlet counts as for media mail. It's been a minute since I've looked at the the language.
Rules about
Yeah.
what is
And
a book.
yeah, and
And every office is different.
Yes.
right, yes, it definitely depends on who, and that's one of the great things. Make friends with the people who work at your post office. I love the folks that work at my post office. Like we're like, always say hi to each other. There was, I forget who it was, I think somebody famously like posted on Instagram that they like wrote to the post office and they like sent a copy of their comics and they were like, can I get written confirmation that this is acceptable for media mail so I can show it to my post office?
Post office has been gutted though with personnel. I mean,
Yeah.
they got checking.
Right on, I mean
don't
that's,
think they
yeah.
ever did. I used to send single floppy in a small envelope, first class. And no one ever tore the backer board.
Uh-huh.
Tight. And it was like, I don't know, 40 cents to mail it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was nothing. And no one ever checked, so.
Yeah, I've definitely had like a couple packages checked, but that was like a deck of tarot cards that I was selling, and it was like clearly something was rattling in the box, and I was like, oh, okay. So, anybody else? Oh.
I'd just like to say, I walked in the door, I'm a zine maker myself, and was thinking, how do I get my zines out into the world? You've done a great job getting me there, so then the wheels start rolling. It's
Oh,
like,
good.
Wait a minute, I'm part of a group, the co-op type group that does zines on their own, so I'm thinking, maybe we should start a distro. And then I'm thinking, there are other ways in which you could do it, but you threw in something at the end that I just wanted to point out. You talked about the idea of promoting your zines wherever and however possible. You do it locally, you do it through distros like yourself, you do it at shows. I'm gonna hijack just slightly. I have a brand new, about 6-month-old YouTube site that is called Fanzine Live. And I do a weekly look at new zines, I do some classic zines, I do a little bit on my own stuff. I'm also doing first-person stuff where the creators can present. And I do it all for free just because it's fun. And
Yeah.
much like you find your passion and
You want to
roll
spread
with it.
that out, yeah.
So if anybody in the room is interested, I'd be happy to talk to them. And I'd love to talk to you
Yeah.
further about how maybe we could work to route people to Radiator,
Right on. Yeah. And how do you find the folks that you?
Right now, I'm going through all sorts of social media. I use all the Facebook groups I can find. I use Instagram. I'm using Threads, Blue Sky, just going out that way. And
Nice.
organically, it's working out.
Yeah, that's
So,
awesome.
That's really cool.
Cool.
Your stuff is very inspiring.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. Oh wait, sorry. I think we have time for a question. I don't know. Oh,
Okay, mine's just really quick. This week, my wife sat down with me, and I have a book I'm printing this fall, like this winter, and she was like, Hannah, how are you going to get The King's Companion in every household in America? And I told her, I was like, I'm going to go to this panel. So anyway,
okay.
that's it.
Uh-oh. Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming out. Oh,
I do have a question. I just wanted to. Okay. Just for anyone thinking, I'm not making anything. I'm here because I'm not making anything. I thought it would be cool. Plus the distribution. But I did want to ask about whether or not, I'm not sure you may have talked about this already. Do you release digital copies and possibly international mailing? Like if that is truly the nightmare that
Yeah.
you always hear it is. And tips?
yeah, super quickly. International mailing is a nightmare. I have a plugin on my website where it calculates the shipping for me, and so then the customer just gets charged for it. I haven't done anything with digital stuff. That's outside of my wheelhouse. I'm very much a paper person, but I'm sure there are a ton of people here who are into digital stuff. So, thanks everybody. Have a great CXC.